Probably smokes a little doobie now and again. Pleased to meet you. It keeps the bottom of your breasts warm. You don't have to wear a bra. Chatty Cathy's character, Chatty Cathy's character, Chatty Cathy's character. Boy oh boy. Whew. New t-shirt, slightly shorter hair. Okay, second video. So this next video is from Actually Happened, another Instagram channel that upload videos of stories, of real life stories that have happened. So this next video is called I Spent a Night with the Ugliest Nerd in My College. I had no choice. Okay, so remember, I had no choice, because that's key to this video.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn, or Jossie, as my friends call me. I happen to be the one who had an affair with a college professor. I got in so much trouble trying to hide this fact from my best friend because he happened to be her father. Cathy and I were roommates in college. From the first conversation we had, I realized that we had so much in common that I immediately liked her. Her dad, Mr. Paxton, also worked at the same college as a literature professor. So when the time came for me to pick up an elective course, I had no doubts about English literature. And here's where the story actually begins.
So we have our two main characters, two university students, college students, and we have Mr. Paxton. Now I want you to keep in mind the name Paxton, because we're Mr. Paxton, because we're going to come back to that, because I think they're trying to tell us something here, or he's trying to tell us something here. But yeah, we'll decipher this a little bit later. And by the way, Mr. Paxton, but his first name is George, and there's another George in this that you'll come to see. So just not to get too confused.
Mr. Paxton had that deep and pleasant voice, and by the way, looked handsome and pretty young for his age. His class was really interesting for me, in both the way he was teaching it and in the topics he covered. He talked about love a lot, and outlined something romantic in virtually every literary masterpiece.
We can see that Paxy's the cool guy. He thinks of himself as one of the students. He's the teacher with a devil-may-care attitude. He's the heartthrob. He's the older, knowledgeable man that knows about romance and what women want. Probably smokes a little doobie now and again. Discusses, there's no boundaries in discussion. You don't have to wear a bra in his class. There's probably women with, do you remember the Indiana Jones film where it's got I love you or something like that written on the girl's eyelids? And when Indiana Jones is teaching his archaeology class, she'll sort of shut her eyes like that so he can read I love you. He's probably got women like that at the front doing that to him as well.
Reason to date this find as we have. Any questions?
And one day, I knocked on Mr. Paxton's office door to show him my creation. He insisted on me reading it out loud, and I felt like my voice was shaking. As soon as I finished, he stood up and came up to me, and that made me stand up too. And then he began praising my poem and me.
So we see Paxy and Joz, and she's this diminutive little figure, and he's so big in the frame that they can't even fit his head in. So we get a sense of his status and her status here, hitting home the discrepancy of age and the power, the oomph of his groin and his virulence, the word that I cannot say that I've been trying to say for 10 minutes. And then, miraculously, she has a growth spurt. She grows 2 feet in 5 seconds, so it all evens out.
And then suddenly, we kissed.
Then we see Paxy, cock of the walk, walking past Joz in the hall and giving it his Mick Jagger. Pleased to meet you. I hope you know my name is Paxy.
And whenever I saw Mr. Paxton, or now I should probably just call him George, in the hallways, I tried to not even look at him.
And then we come to the scene with her thought bubbles, and they're not very empowering of their female characters. That actually happened, because we have thought bubbles of makeup, food, clothes, and of course Paxy. And considering this is an institution, she's at an institution for higher learning, you thought they would have something of more substance rather than falling back on the old cliches of the ingenues. Ingenues? How's your snooze? How's your snooze? Now, Joz is very worried about her intonation, saying that she might give her away when she talks to Kathy.
I was afraid that she would be able to guess how I felt about him just by my intonation or something.
I just had the most amazing class with Paxton. I had such a wonderful class with Paxi. Yeah, I mean, it's not like she's going to turn around and be aspirant. Oh, look at me with the big words. Aspirant, breathy. I just had the most amazing class with Paxi, with your dad. I mean, come on, are we supposed to believe that? So now Joz decides to write a poem. So we move into the realm of poetry, the dark arts of the poem.
And since everything between us started with my poem, I wrote another one. But this time I dedicated it to him and rhymed his name in there. I wanted to add as much romance and eroticism, by the way, to my gift as I could. I was planning to give him that after my next class, and until then, I hid it in my drawer to make sure that Kathy wouldn't accidentally come across it.
This makes me a little suspicious about the veracity of the story. This is one red flag, and I'll tell you why. Let's check the internet and have a look how easy it is to rhyme words with George. Okay, test time. Words rhyme with George. Let's have a look. Georgie rhymes. And here we've got a list. Borge, gorge, goosh, dorge, forge, gorge, lorge, morge, dorge, porge, dorge, dorge. I've heard about 2 of those. You can forge a friendship. Yeah, okay. Lorge, a surname. You're never going to rhyme that unless the person's name's Lorge. And Morge, same again, never going to do that unless the name's Morge. Norge. Okay, so this is slightly different. A constitutional monarchy in Northern Europe and the western side of the Scandinavian Pennsylvania achieved independence from Sweden in 1905. But would you realistically use that? Storge. Now this is one I have come across before. The words of love in Greece. I think Storge is family members. Yeah, Ludos is the sort of fun love, like the nothing serious. So Ludos is a fun love, nothing serious. Philia is love of things, I think. Storge is more family. But then we go into Corge, not even a definition for that one. So you're out. What next? Borge, another surname, unless it is Borge, you're never going to use that. That's out as well. Corge. Oh, okay, in France, marrows are traditionally served with as a gratin, sieved and cooked with butter, milk, egg and flavoured with salt and pepper. More obscure. People are going to think you made that name up, so you're never going to use that either, unless you're French. But why would you be French? And that's it. So I think we could safely assess that George is almost unrhymable. Now we get a little insight into Caffrey's character. Kathy wanty, Kathy takey.
Kathy's boyfriend, Andrew, asked her out, and she decided to borrow my lipstick, which was also in that drawer.
I mean, she didn't even ask to borrow a lipstick. She went straight into a drawer to use it. Kathy, 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 if you only knew where those lips have been. Daddy Paxy's junk.
When I came back in our room and saw her holding that letter, I literally felt like everything inside me died for a second. Kathy looked at me questioningly, and I panicked. I knew I had to come up with some worthy lies to explain what exact George was mentioned in my poem. I suddenly recollected one guy from my course whose name was also George, and who happened to be a total nerd. You know, the one who wears glasses, tucks his shirt into his pants, and pulls them all the way to his waist. So I pretended that I was deeply in love with him.
So she said George from one of her classes, but she didn't specify what class he's from. So the letter was in an envelope. So she took it out of the envelope and read it. So that's 2 strikes now. We had taking the lipstick without asking, and then the letter. So I think Kathy's a little bit invasive, isn't she?
But at the same time, I was ashamed to tell Kathy about my feelings. I stood there frozen and awaiting Kathy's reaction to my words. She frowned a little, but then gave me back my poem, put on my lipstick, and hurried out on her date.
There's something a little disconcerting about her mouth, like it's all sort of lips there. Looks like it's surprise time for Joz.
When my totally inspired roommate with ardent eyes announced that by that evening I had to be ready to go out on a double date. She apparently was going to be there with her Andrew, and I was supposed to be extremely surprised with my date, as she put it. I was definitely somehow intrigued, just like any other girl would be in my place. But when Kathy and I finally appeared at the cafe where we were supposed to have that date, and I took a look at the booth where we were supposed to be sitting, my knees gave way.
Jocelyn,
George
that is
sitting
not a
over there,
booth.
the nerd who I just told you about.
It's incel Weird George from her class. People don't generally talk about the nerds, they talk about the heartthrobs. So how would she be able to put the name George to his face? That's a big leap. I don't buy that. And then to invite this nerdy guy out that, by the looks of it, nobody wants to go out with. I mean, imagine a big university, something like UCLA, where they've got thousands and thousands of students. How would she be able to tell what class that George is? Because remember, in America, where this story comes from, they have majors and then minors. So it's not like they're all doing the same subject. That Kathy, she's some detective. Boy, oh boy.
Kathy looked so excited, and she said that she and Andrew were so happy to play the role of Cupid and finally bring me and my love together. I smiled at her, and I had nothing else to do but force myself to continue the game.
Kathy must have known George to know who to approach to invite him for the double date. But why didn't she mention this when she was first told about it, when she read the poem? Like, I just don't buy it. It's just no. I don't buy that at all. Because she, if anything, Kathy would go, really? That George? She wouldn't just randomly invite him, hoping that he's this complete nerd who's probably about 5 leagues below Joz in the looks department. So, yeah, that's bullshit.
During the whole night, I pretended that I was shy and silent sitting next to George, while in reality I was bored to death listening to George's stories about how he participated in a Star Wars movie fan festival or something.
They love a cliche in actually happened. So of course George is wearing glasses. He feels comfy with his trousers pulled up, like so many of us do. But that won't be complete without him participating in a Star Wars movie fan festival, would it? These are all archetypes, they're not real people. Just because you wear glasses, like your trousers pulled up a little bit to keep your nipples warm and feel secure and snug and comfy, doesn't mean that you like Star Wars as well.
And George insisted on walking me to my dorm. Then he kissed me goodbye on my cheek, and as I guessed further, he became totally sure that was how we began our relationship.
So my view on George has changed somewhat. I don't see an incel having the kahunas to plant a kiss on Jocelyn to make that move. So maybe he's not, but there's something definitely, he's always got this curmudgeonly look on his face, and there's definitely something sinister about him. But maybe not the incel that I once had him down for.
And one day he announced that he had booked a room in a motel, decorated it with rosebuds and candles, and checked with my biological calendar that I was available. I really panicked. I told him that I had something urgent to do and that right after that I'd join him in that motel.
Okay, so now we're getting to the crux of it. He's booked a hotel room, and I'm guessing he hasn't booked this room to recreate his favourite Star Wars scene. Well, there is that Jabba the Hutt scene with Princess Leia, where she's in the chains and he's pulling her. For the love of God, tell him no, then the problem is solved. And this is where what I think actually happened, play a little loosey-goosey with the truth.
And rushed to my George for advice. He calmed me down and promised to call me when I'd be in that motel pretending to be my dad or something, so that I could escape from Nerd George. Feeling relieved, I went to that motel to play yet another role.
But look, let's cut the crap. He's not booked it to play patty cake. So this is where you shut that down.
I will shut that shit down! No exceptions.
George was sitting on the bed when I entered the room, and he looked angry and discerning at the same time. It turned out that when I went to my George for advice, that jerk followed me, listened to our talk through the keyhole, and understood everything. And now he threatened me that he'd tell Kathy and the college president about me and my literature professor, and that both of us would be involved in a huge scandal.
Okay, so there's a different play to be had here. Because he's blackmailing you into sex, instead of threatening Incel George with this, go on the counterattack by actually reporting him. And that you were going to see your lecturer, Paxi, for advice on what to do about him.
The only way to avoid all of this was for me to sleep with this nasty bastard right then. I was terrified at that moment, so tears started running down my face. I imagined for a second that the truth was revealed and that my love was kicked out of college, having lost his job and his family, because I bet Kathy would stop talking to both of us in that case. I couldn't let that happen. So, still sobbing, I got closer to my boyfriend and started unbuttoning my shirt. When I left that motel, I felt dirty, as if I had just taken a dip into muddy water.
A dip in the muddy water? Oh, you didn't let George in that way as well, did you? Where's your self-respect, Joz? Where have you put it? Where have you put it, or didn't you have it in the first place? Or perhaps she took a dip and George is a fan of pegging. We just don't know.
I spent another 20 minutes in the shower trying to get rid of every single memory of that night.
Well, yeah, because you've let Sex Past George have a dip in the muddy water.
But at the same time, somewhere deep inside, I felt like I was a hero, and like I had saved my beloved George from the many problems that our affair could have caused. First thing in the morning, I rushed to his office. I wanted to talk to him before classes started. I just needed to tell him that there was nothing he should worry about, and that stupid jerk wasn't going to hurt George's family or his career. I kept imagining that as soon as he heard that, he'd raise me in his arms and call me his savior. But when I rushed into his office, he stared at me as if I did something totally inappropriate. I tried to ignore that look. I went straight to the matter at hand and told him that I slept with the nerd George for him, but my George kept looking at me as if I was nothing. Then he strictly said that he didn't understand what I was thinking about and asked me to leave the office of my professor, as he put it. I couldn't believe this. The man that used to say how badly he wanted me now didn't even want to admit that we had a relationship. That really hurt me. I closed the door just as he asked and felt destroyed.
Oh, they're all the same, Joz. They're all the same.
I closed the door just as he asked and felt destroyed. I withdrew myself from the literature course right away, even though it was already too late to get a refund. For me, that meant nothing compared to the opportunity of never attending George's, Mr. Paxton's class again. By the way, a week or so later, I accidentally saw another girl student entering his office during after-class time, and I bet she was going to become his next victim.
Looks like Paxy's up to his old tricks again. The old scamp. Now, here comes my Columbo moment. Remember earlier I told you to keep in mind Mr. Paxton, the name Mr. Paxton. Well, those of you sad enough to write the name down into anagrams, you can find if you rearrange the letters in Mr. Paxton, you get dun 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 porn tax. Shocking coincidence? I think not. That's all I've got on that point, so yeah. However, I do see a solution for Jocelyn. She threatens to expose Paxi as M. Porntax, the most damning of evidence. Or she could tell Paxi she's pregnant and blackmail him for straight A's. All the secret's out. This means she doesn't have to waste the money on tuition and she'll get an easy ride, no pun intended, in class. But let's look at the legitimacy. Of this story. That's easy for you to say, Adam. There's George, Incel George, telling you that he booked the hotel room. And at this point, I think any rational mind would say, look, enough's enough. I've been nice to him. I can't lead him on anymore. I'm going to put myself into a dangerous situation here. I can't just see any rational woman saying, okay, we'll have a hotel room together. I mean, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. And then finally, there was the name Mr. Paxton, which we deciphered into meaning M porn tax. I know what you're thinking. Adam, don't be stupid. They've changed the names to protect those involved in the story. So George isn't his real name. But then why would actually happened pick the name George? I mean, any self-respecting poet would shy away from writing a poem about someone called George, because there just simply isn't the names to rhyme with George. I pass it over to you, my audience. Did this actually happen? Write down in the comments below if you think this did actually happen and is a true story.